Our next speaker, Barbara Lamb, is a psychotherapist and regression therapist who has hypnotically regressed roughly 800 patients who have experienced extraterrestrial encounters. She has co-authored Alien Experiences and has also co-authored Crop Circles Revealed. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you Ms. Barbara Lamb to talk about extraterrestrial human hybrids.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for coming back from dinner. That's a big thing right there. I appreciate it. And I'm going to be giving you a lot of information tonight about the human ET hybrid reproduction program. And this material comes from various sources, mostly from my regression work with, as John said, nearly 800 people. And I've done at least 2,000 regressions for people who have had these extraterrestrial encounters. So I've been doing this regression work for 21 years. There's so much material to share from that work, and tonight I've been invited to speak on the hybrid program. And the official title is ET Human Hybrids, Are They in Our Future? I also have material from a very detailed doctoral dissertation about ET human hybrids, authored by Christiane Quiros, PhD. She did interviews with 6 different people who live amongst us. I know most of those people myself, and they are human ET hybrids looking like you and me and functioning very well here amongst us as human beings. Also, I have material from a wonderful researcher here in Southern California, Steve Colburn. Also, I have been meeting and interviewing various human hybrids, at least as far as we know, that's what they really are. So I'd like to start with the thought that perhaps you and I and all of us are ET human hybrids from way, way, way back. And many of you know of the work of Zecharia Sitchin, that wonderful scholarly research he did on ancient Sumeria and the tablet, the cylinder seals, all that information. And he and other researchers have come up with the fact that at least 275,000 BC hybrids here on Earth were created by humanoid extraterrestrials doing reproductive processes with our earthly primates. Gradually, over many generations and many iterations of genetic work with those beings, the species primate with ET DNA was gradually upgraded over many thousands of years into Homo sapiens. And then many more thousands of years and more genetic work, improvements made, we came up with Homo sapiens sapiens, you and me, basically. And we know that from about 600 BC onwards, master teachers came to the earth to work with human beings. They apparently came from somewhere else, another dimension, maybe another planet, maybe another universe, and came to enlighten human beings and to increase our spirituality and our moral thinking, our moral behavior. And through history, we know from fairy tales, from folklore, from legends, from myths, from biblical writings. We know about the Nephilim. We know about unusual creatures, unusual beings who came here to the earth and had something to do with at least some human beings. We've had reports through the centuries of strange beings approaching humans. We have reports of humans being taken away for a while, or maybe even taken away permanently. Who were they taken away by? We know about humans here and there throughout history being presented with strange babies and told that those strange-looking babies were actually theirs. And we know of many tales and depictions visually of creatures who are half human and half animal. We also know that for about 50,000 years, we've had reports of flying spaceships, reports of godlike beings coming to Earth and actually mating with human beings, human females. This is according to many, many traditions on Earth. And we certainly know, especially with some of the television programs today, we do know about ancient artifacts that seem to be influenced by space or space beings, depictions of space beings, and some of their very ancient flying equipment. So we have sculptures, we have carvings, we have paintings, we have cylinder seals, we have flying crafts that have been depicted even in some of the ancient temples in Egypt. And we have all kinds of depictions of unusual, other kinds of human-like beings working alongside with or teaching or coaching smaller human beings. So there are different kinds of hybrids. You've probably heard of wanderers. Wanderers are described as extraterrestrial souls who are actually living in human bodies from birth onward, and of course are very influential to those humans they live in. We also know about walk-ins. I've had the privilege of actually meeting and talking at length with a few people who are walk-ins, and that means that an extraterrestrial soul has taken over a human body when a human is ready to leave this life. And that could happen at any age of that human being. So the soul decides to leave and makes a soul agreement with the soul of an extraterrestrial to inhabit that body from then on. It's very interesting talking with these people, the walk-in people, who do remember a lot of details about their extraterrestrial life and also have the memories in the brain of the person they are then inhabiting. So we might wonder why some of the reports of hybridization are true that people are making about having hybrid children. Well, John Mack, eminent professor of psychiatry at Harvard and a very close friend of mine and colleague, he and other researchers have found the total consistency in the reports by abductees in their regressions and similar reports made by people worldwide about having hybrid children. These people don't even know each other or don't even know of each other. And the abductees, I want to call them experiencers rather than abductees. So the experiencers report about their hybrid children hesitantly and sort of reluctantly, privately. They don't just go around announcing this. And because it's very personal, private material, and they don't want to be scorned or scoffed at. And very few of these people who report having hybrid babies and hybrid children, even hybrid adult children, very few of them seem to be psychiatrically disturbed, although they might, some of them, have symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder because they've been afraid of these contacts that have happened, these abductions, and their fear that the abductions might continue to happen. So it seems like these experiencers do not seem to be the type of people to just make up stories about ET experiences and about having hybrid children. Instead, as I said, they're sort of embarrassed, they're reluctant, they want to remain private about these things until they can find somebody who knows something about them and would be likely to accept their accounts as true. So these reports coming through regressions about having hybrid procedures done, hybrid children, they have characteristics of real events. In a regression, by the way, I take a person back to an experience that they've had that they might remember consciously only a very few moments of at the beginning of the experience or even at the end of the experience, and nothing in between. But when we do the regression, we go moment by moment by moment from the very first bit of something happening, and so it proceeds in that way. I've never done a regression with somebody who just tells a story, as if they know the whole story and the outcome. They are surprised, these experiencers, when the details begin to come up moment after moment after moment. So psychological testing of these people, when they have been tested, shows no signs of mental or emotional problems. They're perfectly sane, balanced, intelligent, good people. And these people, contrary to some public opinion about this, these people have not shown any indication of having had earlier childhood sexual abuse. They seem to be free from that in their lifetimes. There could be an exception here and there, but the generalization is that they have been free of childhood abuse by humans. And there's nothing in their reports and in the regressions that suggests that these experiences are really dreams or are delusional or are made-up fantasies. And, very significantly, these reports and these details that come through the regressions seem to correspond completely, in so many cases, with unusual markings that the person has on his or her body from one of these experiences we've regressed to. And in the case of women, very often these reports are accompanied by actual physical missing pregnancies here in their life on Earth. And these pregnancies have been verified by doctors, and lo and behold, they're gone after a while. And these reports seem to be accompanied frequently by missing time experiences. So let's take a look at the types of races of ETs that seem to be doing the hybridization. Well, the Greys, we hear about them probably more than we hear about any other type of group, Zeta Reticuli, Greys. And yes, they do a lot of reproductive programming with people through egg removal from women and sperm removal from human men. And we have reptilians who don't seem to use that method so much that I know of, but they do direct intercourse with human females, and also their reptilian females do mating with our human males in many cases. And there are quite a number of very human-looking, human-like races out there who are extraterrestrial, and they combine in various ways with our humans to create hybrids. And they say things like, "Thank you, we need you, you are saving our race." And the people who have experiences with these human-like beings and have hybrid children with them seem to be having these experiences with the type of being that they, these people, these humans, were once in previous incarnations. That seems to be a very common thing amongst people who have ET experiences. And we have Pleiadians, some types of Pleiadians. There are a number of different types because there are a number of different planets in the Pleiadian group. And some of them, like on Alcyone, seem to live between the third and the fourth dimension. And they combine with humans, with hybrids, and they produce highly evolved, conscious, spiritual hybrid children. Those children get to live with us sometimes, and sometimes they get to live with that type of Pleiadian. And those children can look very human, very attractive. It is said that they can live 400 years. That's interesting. And they can easily go back and forth from Earth to their planets. We also have the Anunnaki and all the stories about how they came and helped to create the human race way, way back in time. We have reports of beings from Sirius B, from Metron, also from the Essassani beings, very small, sweet beings that some of my clients have been meeting with throughout their whole life, every time they have an experience. And they seem to be involved in the hybrid program as well. And there probably are more species of ETs that I'm not even mentioning who are involved with this. A little bit more now about the gray aliens. The gray aliens seem to have an alliance between several species of extraterrestrials. And the gray aliens tend to look very similar to each other, although they can be various heights. They can be 3 feet tall or 5 feet tall or 7 feet tall. They seem to have agendas that are similar to each other group of gray. And they claim that they have been reproducing by cloning for a few thousand years. And they have been changed over time by major genetic engineering. In other words, in this genetic engineering and cloning, that they have eliminated the capacity for emotion. They also have been developing larger heads to accommodate their larger brains. And they have reduced their body size and mass to the little spindly beings whom we see today. And also, they say that their genomes have been damaged. Their genomes have been damaged by excessive exposure to radiation during long space travel, and by warring, fighting, competing with other species and losing a lot of members that way, and by the cloning for reproducing. With each round of cloning, meaning that their DNA gets damaged even further. So they look to us, many of these gray races, as a savior in a sense. By combining with our reproductive material, they can then at least have some of their species continuing mixed together with some of our species. So there are also gray-skinned, gray types with suction cup fingertips, and they gestate the human enters eggs in their own wombs, mixed with their DNA. And sometimes when they have abducted a human woman who's involved in their reproductive project, they ask the human mother to put her hands on the extraterrestrial pregnant female's belly to send human energy to that fetus, which is a hybrid. In that case, the fetus will be born to that particular type of extraterrestrial. We don't hear about this very much. And will be kept and raised by the type of being. And then there's the group called the Zetas. They are, according to a couple of my clients, we've done many regressions to their experiences with Zetas, even to having been Zetas in previous lifetimes. The Zetas are reported to be wonderful beings, and they are dying out. They destroyed the surface of their planet, and some went underground to live on their planet. Some went to other planets to live, and some stayed on the ships. And they wanted to develop brains, so their craniums, to accommodate the brains, became larger, so large that they could no longer pass through their own birth canals. Therefore, they lost their ability to reproduce, and they began hybridization in order to perpetuate their race, at least in some form. We also have insectoid beings, mantis beings, who do reproductive programs. They are very tall, very thin beings with extremely long arms and legs which seem to just fold up. They have huge eyes like a praying mantis or like a giant ant, sort of wrap-around eyes. And they tend to have a very high ranking on the ships with other beings who are combined with the various programs they do with abducted human beings. So they have a supervisory role, a directory role. And they can also take people from home, and they can test them, they can teach them, they can train them in a number of ways. And a lot of these mantis beings, insectoids, become mentors. In fact, lifelong guides for some of the people they work with. And they have these long-term relationships. And they create hybrid beings. Many people are kind of spooked by the thought of a giant praying mantis type of being. But all the people I've worked with who have contact with them realize that these beings who look so strange and unlikely that we would like turn out to be very and even unconditionally loving. So hooray for the mantis beings, the insectoids. And of course there are Nordics. We nickname them very human-looking beings, highly attractive, tall, often blonde-haired, but not always. And some of these beings can materialize and dematerialize, pass through walls, ceilings, etc. And many of them are very benevolent, very friendly, kindly, helpful. They answer experiencers' questions. They speak philosophically, and they can visit with us here on Earth. And some of them are probably even living permanently with us. They seem to be able to create verbally, as we do, and also telepathically. So let's talk now about the process of hybridization, because it's done in quite a number of different ways. A very frequent way that we probably hear of the most is when eggs, ova, are taken from the ovaries of a human female and mixed with the sperm, which has been taken by a human male, whom the woman may or may not know. And then that material is modified, acted on, in a dish, probably like a little petri dish on a ship, modified with ET genes. And then that mixture is subsequently planted into that human female, and this female becomes pregnant, goes to the doctor, says, I think I'm pregnant, and the pregnancy is confirmed medically. And that mixture, so we're already hybrid, you see, part DNA from ETs, part human, and that is gestated for 1 or 2 or 2.5 or 3 months in the woman, and then she's taken again, and that little embryo is removed. She experiences then the missing syndrome, missing fetus syndrome, and suddenly it's gone, and the doctors can't explain it. Oh, well, they say sometimes the little embryo pulls away from the wall of the uterus and just gets absorbed into the system. But the woman may really wonder about this, and particularly if she became pregnant after having not had any sexual relationships for quite a period of time. So the whole thing is a mystery to her. And then, you see, when that embryo is taken from her womb in this subsequent abduction, it's put into a glass container on the ship, a container of special liquid full of special nutrients for the fetus to thrive in. And then, apparently, that embryo, of course, develops into a fetus, and when the extraterrestrial's taking care of this tank of liquid with the fetus in it and discerns that this fetus is mature enough now to be born, they remove that fetus from the tank and remove it there on the ship in the air. So another method is taking eggs from a human female and mixing with genetic material from the extraterrestrials. And in other words, no human male, no human sperm is involved in this method. And then this mixture is implanted in the human female, gestated for 1 to 3 months, etc., removed, as I have said, put in the gestation tank, and then is eventually born on the craft. A third method is that a human female and a human male will mate on the ship. They've both been abducted. They are made basically to do this, and the ETs standing around are watching really closely just to be sure that the act is complete and that conception will happen. So they do conceive, and then the pregnant woman realizes she's pregnant and is taken again, and then the extraterrestrials genetically modify the fetus in her through the wall of the uterus, the abdomen, and then they do that with a kind of injection, and then the baby is born to the mother when full term here on Earth and continues to live here full term on Earth. Another method is that a human female will actually mate with an extraterrestrial male. And conversely, a human male will mate with an extraterrestrial female. Sometimes that seems to happen here on Earth in their own homes. Sometimes that takes place on the ship. And then we have a hybrid human male mating with a hybrid female. And we have a hybrid female or male mating with a human male or female. So we do that for, or I should say, they do that for a number of generations with a hybrid mating with a human, and then that offspring, which is hybrid, part them, part us, will mate with another human until eventually they are pretty human-like. So another method is eggs taken from a human female could be planted into an extraterrestrial female or a hybrid female on a ship, and that being will carry the fetus and give birth and keep and raise that baby. Sometimes a human female is taken on a ship and is artificially impregnated with material from various extraterrestrial sources, not involving a human male at all. And they call that genetic splicing. So that different varieties, you see, of ET human hybrids are formed. And then sometimes an extraterrestrial male who seems to be very familiar to the experiencer female here on Earth, this sort of familiar extraterrestrial male will come to the woman's home and impregnate her, and then she will have a hybrid child. So in terms of this removal of eggs from the women, just to detail that a little bit further, one method is to penetrate the woman's abdomen right near the navel and somehow suck out or remove eggs from her ovaries, leaving a triangular bruise shape. I've had clients who've had a bruise shape like that, and then they had the rest of the procedure develop, and I've seen a number of photographs of the triangular bruise shape right near the navel. Another method of egg removal is penetrating right directly through the navel to the ovaries, sucking the eggs out through the navel, leaving a drop or two of pus that the woman will wake up the next morning and think, gee, what happened? How did I get that? And then another method of egg removal is going up through the woman's vagina into the ovaries and removing the eggs in that particular way. Now, a method that I know of from a few of my clients is genetic modification of the fetus in the womb. And one of my clients I did more work with over a period of 10 years than anybody, and she was carrying twins in the early 1990s, and she was abducted many, many, many times. And on this one particular night, she was abducted, laid down on a medical table on the ship, and there was a female extraterrestrial, tall and thin, standing next to her, and that female felt her whole abdomen with the twins in it and seemed to bypass the first twin she came to and stopped at the second twin, feeling right through the woman's abdomen, feeling the uterus and the baby in it, and said, yes, this is the one. And she took out a syringe needle sort of thing and injected something directly into the woman's abdomen, into the uterus, into that fetus developing inside. And when she was finished, she said to my abducted female client, "Good. Now he is exactly the way we want him to be." It turns out that full term, this woman gave birth to the twins. One twin came out all kind of scrunched and wriggled up and everything, and eyes closed and kind of shaking, as jerking as they do. But this baby, the one who must have been affected by the ET DNA, came out hale and hearty, his blue eyes wide open, his hand like this, kind of looking up at the mother and the doctors, with a very, very wise look. And that baby boy has turned out to be an experiencer, a very frequent experiencer who absolutely loved his space family and his space friends and the little hybrids that he did a lot of playing with on the spaceship. Now we have to talk about men. Men are not immune to this reproductive program. So an abducted man will usually have a mechanical device fitted over his penis by these extraterrestrials. It's kind of a suction device. And there are wires from this device which are also applied to the man's testicles. And then this makes the penis erect. And believe me, the man is not inspired to be erect with this sort of thing going on, and the sperm is extracted. This is not pleasurable for the man. It's not a great sexual experience, but very efficient and apparently very effective on the part of the ETs. These ETs explain to these men frequently that this is for a very important purpose. And then maybe 3 or 4 or more months later, that very same man will be abducted and will be shown a fetus in one of these glass tanks on the ship. And he'll be told something like this: "This being comes from your seed." Then another method of taking the sperm from human men is that an alien or sometimes a hybrid female will rub against him when he's abducted on the ship and mount him and receive the sperm directly inside her. And sometimes when this mating is happening, the female alien who's doing the mounting onto the human male, she somehow projects a screen image looking like a gorgeous human female, an exotically gorgeous human female. And so the male, could be pretty receptive to that. And then in the middle of the actual mating act, the screen image wears off, and what the man will see is the extraterrestrial. I know of quite a number of people, men, who've had this happen with reptilian females. So that's kind of disturbing. In fact, one man whom I worked with many, many regressions over several years, he really had trouble at home, wanting to be sexual with his wife. And he didn't know consciously why this was, because he didn't consciously remember these experiences. But when it all came out in regression and then we could work with that therapeutically, things went better between him and his wife. So sometimes an extraterrestrial female will come to a human male's bed at home and rub against him, mate with him, and then she leaves with his reproductive material. So this doesn't even have to involve an abduction. It can happen right at home. And some human men seem to meet with and mate with repeatedly the very same extraterrestrial female. This would be, of course, over a period of years, and she presumably has his hybrid children, which are raised on the ship. So reptilians are very well known for loving to have sex with human beings, and sometimes an ET male will come to Earth and impregnate the mother and leave, and sometimes the mother thinks that this encounter was with some sort of angel and can even feel quite positive about it, whether she gets to keep that baby or not. And another method that happened with one of my clients was that she was taken and she was on a ship on a medical table, and ETs around her, as she was describing it in the regression, they weave strands of light over her abdomen. And she felt good with that. She felt a surge of energy, specifically in her womb. And these ETs said they were treating her womb and preparing the cells of the lining for implanting her with another child. And sure enough, she apparently did get implanted, and she, here on Earth, gave birth to a genius son who had unusual characteristics, extreme brilliance, and she's getting to raise him here on Earth. So a special note about this whole thing, which I find very interesting, is that for the Greys, at least, that species, for the Greys to do this hybridization program, they need large amounts of hormones, tissue samples, blood plasma, biochemicals, in order to provide the fluid for this mixture, ET-human mixture. And they take these components, hormones, tissue samples, blood plasma, biochemicals, from other abductees in some cases. And sometimes they take these components from cattle. So we think about cattle mutilations. Maybe that's one of the major reasons. Maybe it's the reason, I don't know, for cattle mutilations. And cattle, of course, we know do share many of our human genetic traits. Another special thing about this is that several of the clients in my monthly experiencer group, which I've had running since 1994, and it's still continuing, at one particular meeting, the women started talking about their hybrid children and how they don't get to raise them here on Earth, and some of them would very much like to raise them here on Earth. Some of them don't want anything to do with them. But they compared notes, and they realized that after a fetus was removed from them, after 2 or 3 months gestation, then there'd be a number of months that would go on, and 9 months later, from when they first noticed that they were pregnant, these women began to lactate profusely, which they wouldn't do if they were just human beings having had a miscarriage or something. They would not lactate 9 months later. But one woman said this, and the other woman, about 5 women in my group said, really? Yeah, that happens to me too. So they wondered if they were frequently being taken for nursing the hybrid babies, their hybrid babies on the ship, and that maybe somehow that lactation had been stimulated during those months when they, were no longer pregnant and the fetus had been taken. Some women have unusual pregnancies and almost lose the fetus. They have to be in bed a lot during that pregnancy and eventually give birth to that baby here on Earth. And they notice that it's a very strange-looking baby. And that baby is put right away, usually in an incubator. And within a few hours, and I think this has happened quite a number of times, an ET female, or perhaps she's a hybrid, comes and to the nursery in the hospital, to the incubator, and takes that infant away. And she can get away with that because she has switched off the hospital personnel, so they don't even know that this is happening. What they do realize eventually is that, when they sort of come to again, that infant from that incubator is gone. So you can imagine the reaction of the human mother. What happened to my baby? One woman I worked with in Belgium, she, in one of her experiences, found herself on a medical table in a craft, and she had known already that she was pregnant, nearly full-term pregnant, when she had this particular abduction. And it was the reptilians, in this case, who took her, and they removed a reptilian hybrid baby through the birth process and put the baby right away into what looked like a jelly-like substance. And she, realizing that this baby wasn't a regular human baby, it had some of these kind of reptilian features, but still to her amazement, she felt joyful about this particular baby. And these reptilians thanked her for the baby and kept the baby and said, we will take wonderful care of this baby. We are more suited to raise this baby than you are to raise this baby on Earth. They thanked her, they brought her home, and she never, of course, got to raise that baby. And then a nice side of this whole thing is that some of these extraterrestrials who do this sort of reproductive program also do some pretty nice things too. One of my clients I worked with many, many times, when she was a little girl, she was only age 4, her grandfather, unfortunately, sexually penetrated her, and she was damaged, understandably. And right after that happened, her little ETs, who took her to each experience she had, came and took her and locked her up in a shed in her garden. And they covered her with what she described as a warm blanket of energy. And they said, this is to heal the damage that your grandfather has done to your body. And she was very grateful. They left her there for a few hours, and eventually her grandmother found her locked in the shed and thought, how could you be in a locked shed? I didn't lock you there. Nobody else was here to lock you there. Anyway, the being said to her before they left, we are helping you now so that you can help us when you are mature enough by having wonderful babies. Now, we can't help but wonder if that meant wonderful babies for them or wonderful babies for her to keep and raise on Earth. Another nice thing that happened is that a young couple whom I met in Wyoming back in 1991, they had been trying to conceive and have a baby. And they had conceived some babies, but they'd had quite a few miscarriages. And with no remaining fetus, the cleaning out of the uterus was impeccably clean and professional looking, according to her doctors. And so this had already happened, trying to have children, not being able to have them, having miscarriages, so pregnancies, but miscarriages. And then one night her husband woke up to find 3 large males. He assumed they were human males, very buff, very muscular, very big. They're in the bedroom, and one of them was having sex with his wife right in their bed. And she had her eyes closed. She may not have been fully conscious, but she looked like she was having an amazingly ecstatic experience with this reptilian male. Well, her husband had a few mixed feelings about that, and he wanted to beat them up and kick them out of there, but he couldn't move. They made him paralyzed, but he was able to keep his eyes open and watch what was happening. Now, eventually, these males abducted her, and I did a regression with her to this experience, and they did a healing process on her reproductive organs. And they said to her, "You have given us 3 excellent babies whom we are raising," i.e. the miscarriages she had, "and now we are repairing you so that you may have your own human babies." And indeed, after that point, she had 2 very normal, regular, fine human sons whom I met when they were about age 18 and 20. So the reasons given for hybridization, there are many, and they vary according to which species is involved in that hybrid reproductive program. The main reason that's been given again and again to my clients is that they do these hybrid programs, create hybrids, to save their own dying race. They say they are too inbred. They have been weakened. They can no longer reproduce. Their females are infertile. They have been harmed by nuclear radiation. And another reason is, from their point of view, so that they, the extraterrestrials, can stay on Earth longer when they come to visit. Because, you see, they have bad reactions to our bacteria, our viruses, and so forth. But if they have hybrids who are partly human, they will automatically have at least some immunity to our viruses and bacteria. So they want to ease into human society, some of them. And they consider that Earth is a better place to live than some of their planets. And some of them want to eventually live here permanently. They can't do it, but perhaps their hybrid or subsequent generation of hybrid children will be able to successfully do that. Some of these beings say that they want to create hybrids with us so that those hybrids will be more substantial physically. They'll be stronger, denser, more muscular than they are. Some beings say they want hybrid children who have the component of emotion, particularly the ability to really care, to love, to feel compassion, which they bred out of their species so long ago. Some say they want to settle here when their planets are no longer able to sustain life. Some say they want to create go-betweens between their species and ours, and those offspring would be able to understand both species, theirs and ours. And some say that they are creating hybrids to repair genetic mistakes that they made over thousands of years with their kind of being. They made those mistakes by genetic engineering of themselves and by exposure to radiation with long-distance space travel, and by cloning themselves for enough generations to lose their ability to reproduce biologically. And some have out and out said that they want their hybrids who can spy on or a nicer way to say it, is research us and life on Earth. And if they're partly us, and if they can pass as us, they can do that more effectively. Some of them say they want hybrids to live on Earth at some times, and at other times live on another planet. They just have to make minor adjustments to be able to do that. Some extraterrestrials say that they want to create hybrids who will be able to upgrade the human race. Upgrade us with higher intelligence, with psychic skills, group cooperativeness, telepathic skills, greater perspective of the cosmos. Some extraterrestrials say that they want to create hybrids as a matter of scientific experimentation without necessarily a further goal in mind. Some ETs claim that they want hybrids to perpetuate the human race in some form in case we destroy life on Earth. And that this hybrid race could live on another planet if Earth is not livable any longer, or they could live in a spacecraft. So at least we would continue in some way, and they would continue in some way. Some claim they want to create hybrids who would be a superior new race, a new race that has never been exactly like that before, combining the best of humans and the best of that kind of ET. Some claim they want to create hybrids to upgrade the human race spiritually. And those beings who create hybrids are higher, more spiritually oriented, more spiritually developed, the ETs, than they see that most of us are. And they want to genetically re-encode us to live in more balanced ways, to help us as a human race through continuing as hybrids to be less hostile, less greedy, less competitive, less warlike. So there are many, many reasons. I won't even remember the rest because of time here. But I see no evidence personally of hybrids intending to malevolently take over the world for their own nefarious purposes. If that happens, it just has not come out in my regression work. Well, as you can imagine, women react quite differently to realizing that they have had this reproductive process done and that they have these changes in their life. Some are very confused when they find themselves pregnant without having had sex for a significant period of time, or when using birth control or some other, what they thought was effective method of preventing conception. And they may have mixed feelings about being pregnant, and they may have mixed feelings about the pregnant suddenly disappearing mysteriously. They may have flashbacks of little parts of this reproductive procedure, or they may not. But because of the flashbacks of this sort of thing going on, this can, in some cases, impair the sexual relationship they have with their own male partner at home. Sometimes they feel fearful, sometimes they feel angry and resentful and intruded upon that this sort of process is happening. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they have minimal or no awareness of this process going on. Sometimes they are praised by the ETs and shown appreciation for their participation, saying, "This is beautiful. This is about creation. You are contributing." And sometimes these women feel proud and honored and privileged to be chosen for this reason, to perpetuate life in this particular way. And some feel an ongoing partnership with these extraterrestrials. Now, when women are shown their hybrid babies in a tank, or the hybrid babies when they are born, They have a mixture of reactions, as we humans tend to do. Some are horrified by seeing their hybrid fetuses or babies or children because they're not quite human. They don't look quite right, some of them will say. But some of those women will, on repeated visits with those babies and children, will grow to accept them and care for them and even love them. Some women see their hybrid babies and children as being beautiful-looking hybrids, angel-like, porcelain-like skin, they describe them, big, beautiful eyes, and accept them much more fully. So men, when they have the sperm removed, will often feel invaded, violated, trapped, forced, used, treated inhumanely, embarrassed, self-conscious, and with mating with other abducted humans, yes, other abducted humans, mating with a human male, they sometimes feel coerced, self-conscious, they're watched, they know they're watched very closely, it doesn't seem natural, and yet it's sex, and so they feel some pleasure. And with mating with extraterrestrials or with hybrids, they often have a very strong mixture of feelings, positive and negative. So reactions vary, and when people get to see their hybrid child over a period of years, sometimes they really become loving and very close to them and ask, can I raise this child at home? And they are told, no, the child would not survive well enough on Earth. So I'm going to show some slides now, if I can figure out how to work this. Yes, there we go. Wonderful. This is Kim Carlsberg, a well-known experiencer, who's showing half her, half alien, creating the hybrid baby. She's had that happen apparently a number of times. And here is a depiction of an extraterrestrial with a little glass tube. And in that glass tube is the mixture of the human eggs and their material, or of human sperm and their material. And here you can see, over on the right here, a tank, and in it an upside-down fetus developing in that tank of fluid with extraterrestrials looking on. And here is the hybrid fetus in the gestation tank, this time right side up. Hope that you can see that. And here is a whole stack of these tanks. People see them in different ways. I think that different ETs have different arrangements for developing these hybrids. So here is a column in the middle, and then all these little tanks, each one with its own hybrid fetus in it, and a human-looking extraterrestrial looking on and taking care of the fetuses in that tank. Here we have a whole wall full of fetuses. These are ones, well, these are actually babies who have been taken out of the tank. In other words, they are quote-unquote born. And here are 3 different species of extraterrestrials, including most likely a hybrid, looking at one of these babies having been taken out of the tank. We have 3 basic different stages of hybrids. There's the early stage, the first or second generation of hybrids, half human, half alien, usually more alien-looking than human-looking. They tend to be short, of 3.5 feet to 4 feet tall or so. They tend to be very frail, very listless, wispy, have straw-like hair, over large heads compared to ours, thin bodies, very thin arms, legs, very large eyes, The hybrids usually have some whites in our eyes, but not quite as much as we do. Tiny ears, tiny nose, tiny mouth, and only a vestige of human genitals. This early stage of hybrid is said to need at the least amount of time in the human mother's uterus and the least amount of time of gestation in the glass tank of liquid. And they are nourished, not the way that we nourish ourselves, but they're nourished by absorbing through their skin, absorbing a special liquid containing the appropriate nutrients. They do need some love and nurturing from a human mother because they are part human. They could never survive here on Earth. They always live on the craft or on another planet. And many of these early stage hybrids have died just in the first few years. So here are some depictions by David Chase, who's interviewed many, many experiencers and gotten these descriptions. Large head, large eyes, again some whites in the eyes. Some of them look a little bit more human-like than others do. The co-author of my book, Alien Experiences, Nadine Lalich, who's here with us this weekend, she had this daughter. She started seeing her when she was a little girl. And then at this stage, and this was just a very few years ago, this hybrid seemed to be maybe age 20, 21 or so, and she would always visit with Nadine when Nadine was taken on the ship. Another early stage hybrid, this was featured in Bud Hopkins' book, one of his earliest books, Debbie Thomas. And a little neonate, looks more like an ET than like a human. And then the middle stage hybrid, hair, long hair, big eyes, tall, thin. This one's looking a little bit more human. So the middle stage humans, hybrids can be 5 feet tall. It could even be 6 feet tall or 6'5", somewhat thin, slightly muscular. They are more human-looking, more robust. They need more time to develop in utero and in the gestation tank. They feed in 2 ways, absorbing through nutrient liquid through the skin, as many ETs do, and ingesting food as we humans do. They seem to have a normal human metabolism. They have full genitalia and reproductive physiology, but they cannot actually reproduce offspring directly. And they can be more responsive to human mothers and fathers' visits on the ship, and that's where a real sense of relationship can develop with these middle stage ones. And they can visit Earth for very brief periods of time, but they cannot live here. And they tend to live longer than the earlier stage and become adults. More middle stage hybrids showing. Different looks, different depictions. This one looking quite human, but almost. And then middle stage again still. Different drawings, different depictions. Getting to be a little more human. Here's a whole cluster with the one over on the right with the blue shirt being the hybrid here. Middle stage still. Male and female hybrids. Big eyes. This one short, very wispy hair, getting to look more human. ETs, and then over at the right there is a hybrid girl looking almost completely human. And down in the lower right, a hybrid girl with the ETs. Middle stage still. These are not living here, but could be here briefly. Lots of hair, but kind of straw-like in this case. Very tall, very white, very pale. Lady in Texas I regressed had this hybrid daughter who was about age 16 here and loved her very much. Some of them look almost skull-like in a way. This one had a glow about him. Reptilian E.T., he's not a hybrid, but he's probably a father of a lot of hybrids. And one of my clients had a lifelong relationship with the tall middle one, with that E.T. Reptilian female, and then eventually noticed in one of our regressions that she met her 2 adult hybrid, reptilian hybrid sons. She was so proud of them. Here's a crowd of people on a street. 2 little guys right there in the front, in the foreground, probably hybrids, mixing with us, or trying to anyway. Bashar, who channels, does a tremendous amount of channeling. Daryl Anka is the channel. This is the entity. He says he's a gray human hybrid from our future, and what a wise being he is. Here's a mantis ET, the parent of some hybrid children. And here is, we're into the late stage hybrids now. Here is a mantis hybrid being whom I met this winter, or a year ago winter, at the International UFO Congress, Fran Harris. She's given me permission to show her picture. So she is part mantis insectoid and human, and she is living here in the East Coast as a regular human being. She's very psychic, very spiritual, very wise. She's working with ET children, that is hybrid children and star children, indigo children. And Semyasi, many of you know about, the Pleiadian, who visited Billy Meyer many, many times. And I include her picture because some of the current hybrids who actually live amongst us look very similar to this. Here's a late stage hybrid. She could live amongst us. Here's a male and female late stage hybrids who could live amongst us. And here is a child late stage hybrid. And another one. Now, there are people, I see them sometimes, you see them looking very much like this, actually living their whole lives with us. Late stage hybrid, the eyes a little bigger, a little bit more intense, as in this case. Another late stage hybrid. And the ones I'm going to show now, I cannot prove that they're hybrid, but they're wonderful examples of how some of the hybrids amongst us who function very, very well, how they do look. They could look like some of our top models. Very clear, big eyes, very forthright looking. And this one, I don't know if these models would want me to call them hybrids, but just know that they are representing the look. And I have come in the last 6 months or so to realize that a lot of people I have regressed are themselves hybrids and are slowly finding out about this. Late stage, clear, open, direct, attractive, usually tall, slim, but not always. And males, great example of what some of the adult hybrid males living amongst us look like. And this one of the characteristics is not much change of expression. And I met a hybrid about 2 weeks ago, myself, met him in a crop circle in England and questioned him. I didn't say, "Are you a hybrid?" But I asked all the other earmarked questions, and it certainly seems as if he is, whether he knows it or not. Many hybrids don't know they're hybrids. Here they are. Look at the intensity of those eyes. And Cynthia Crawford, who's here at the symposium, and she has a table full of her extraterrestrial sculptures. She is a hybrid. Her mother was genetically injected with DNA, extraterrestrial genetics, when the mother was pregnant with her. Her father eventually confessed that had happened. And last but not least, my book, which you might find very interesting, Alien Experiences, co-authored with Nadine Lalich. And so ETs are amongst us. We are probably hybrids ourselves. Hybrids are amongst us. They have a blessing and a curse about being with us. It's very difficult sometimes for them to feel a real part of Earth life. They have trouble making friends sometimes and socializing, and yet they usually can with one or two people. They can marry, and they can have their own children who have a little bit of DNA from ET in them. And but it's a great blessing, too, in many ways, because they're psychic. They're so clear. They're clairvoyant. They know so much. They understand about the cosmos. They feel very often like they're not from here. They feel like their true home is out there, and yet here they are, functioning amongst us. So as you go through your life and you're looking around at fellow human beings, you might be seeing some who have this extraterrestrial component in them, who are actually hybrids. Hopefully, we can be welcoming about that, because they all seem to have a mission to help humanity and to help the Earth. Thank you very much.